Hello everyone and welcome back to another Division 2 video today with some interesting data to look at. Yeah, we're going to do a lot of looking at this and interpretation and talking about it, of course. But before we go do any of that, a huge shout out to Colonel Koenig who has collected all the data, made this nice Excel to make it, available and, it, you know, in a nice shape that he can look at it and interpret it properly, and share it with me, of course, right? Because he doesn't necessarily need to do that. So huge shout out to him. So if you haven't known, Koenig collects a lot of data from tournaments on the SDL Discord and FOB Discord, maybe others, but these are the two I know he does for a fact. And he basically looks at all replay, gets all the data, and puts it together in this nice little Excel. So he has pretty much everything. So if you play against him, he will know what you will pick before you know what you will want to pick. So just that. But he's an absolute legend. We get all this nice stuff from him, and he shares it with the content creators, which is really amazing. So huge shout out to him again. So before we dive into it, there's a few things that need to be mentioned at the start and some disclaimers. So first thing that I also want to say is Attack Bar also got this. So if you haven't noticed yet and you think it's more interesting what Attack Bar has to say about it, feel free to go to him. Also, I can already tell you that I think from what I can remember, his videos on the stats were not super long, but I like to go into details and look at all these little things. So it's probably going to be a little bit of a longer one if I do it. So if that's not your thing, you can also watch it on his channel. Or if you want to hear different interpretations, feel free to watch both of them. Next thing, of course, is I will do some attempts of interpretation for some of these data. This does not necessarily mean these are facts, okay? These are what I am thinking about what we see here and why it is. This is not necessarily why it actually is what it is. So just wanted to throw this out there. This is very depending on so this, what I say is not necessarily what is actually the case. Also, these statistics are influenced by a lot of things. Okay, so of course we have the current meta, but since these are all tournament games, this also means that some divisions might be good, but we don't see this here because they're usually banned, or they're played when they're not banned, which means they're usually not banned on maps where they're not that good anyway, so they might not perform that well. So keep that in mind. Also, there's different difficulties of division. There's different rule sets. So I'm going to mention a few that are going to be important for some of the divisions that we see here. There's different rule sets, which means different divisions are going to be played more or less. And also, there's different skill levels, of course, right? So people might pick divisions in weird matchups, on weird maps, where good players would just shake their head and be like, why would you do that? But it can also be the other way around, that some divisions are just easy and hard to counter for new, easy to play and hard to counter for new players. So things like that. There's a lot of these things that play into this, and we have to keep all of these in mind when we look at the data. Last thing is some of the rule sets that are going to be important. So there have been a few monthlies with specific rule sets, which might have led to some of these divisions being played more or less or having better or worse performance. So first things first, we had the no bans monthly. So no bans at all, which means all the very good divisions that are very often banned. So you have to keep that in mind. The best divisions are usually banned, so you usually don't get to play them. All of these could be played. And we see this right here with SSB being played 20 times, which is very often banned. So this is one thing that we need to keep in mind. Another one was we had some specific theaters. So we had, I think, Normandy, we had an Eastern Front one, I think. Yeah, I think we did. And we had a Southern Front one. And in those, only specific divisions that were in that theater of war were available to be played. And because there were sometimes different numbers for the different factions, number of bans that you get depended on which, well, de facto it depended on which factions you picked. It depended on player 1 and 2, but you didn't really have much choice then which factions you picked. And for example, in the Southern Front one, that led to allies having better divisions available, so the Axis got more bans. It is how it usually played out. And this resulted in the Axis actually having better, better divisions to choose from after the bans, because they had less. The Allied player had less bans for the Axis, and Axis had some decent options left. So, and this is going to be important for a few divisions here. So just keep that in mind. Now, with that out of the way, we can finally dive into it. I'm going to start with the most played divisions, then we're going to go to the best performing divisions, then we're going to go look at the performance of all divisions, then we look at the factions, and last the factions and the types of things, then the map, and then last but not least we can look at the income. It's there. I know it's hard for you not to see them, but this is how we're going to do. What we also can do, Koenig has been so nice to include this, the stats from the last stat sheet. So basically this is from Hell's Highway 2 now, with the nuclear pass being released now, and the previous one was from Normal's DLC to Hell's Highway. Hell's Highway is, for those of you who don't remember, where I normally had some of these as well, but Hell's Highway had another wave of buffs and price decreases, mostly, especially Soviets profited from it a lot. And we had some other massive changes like the MP40 change and things like that. So this is all that happened in the Hell's Highway DLC and the balancing patch that came with it. So I think most notably, I want to actually go back to this first. So we see in the Normandy DLC, we see that for the most part, the most popular divisions, generally speaking, were Western Allied ones and Axis ones. Soviets had some that were popular, like the ones that are always popular, but not a great many of them. What we also see is that, of course, a lot of these divisions that were picked very often were from the Hell's Highway, from the Normandy DLC as well. So it's possible that maybe people were not preferring Western Allied that much at this point already. It's just that, yeah, a lot of these divisions came there, and a lot of the other ones are generally strong. However, if you look at this, we definitely see a difference here. We can clearly see that now Soviets and Axis have some of the most popular picks. Now, keep in mind, that doesn't necessarily mean that Western Allies got super unpopular. It's just possible that they're still banned, most of the good ones, and a lot of the not so, like, that the other ones just got more playable, and this is why we get them more, right? This doesn't necessarily mean that people really prefer those. Also, these here add up, okay? And this is where we see a lot of Western Allied still. So don't take this as Western Allied unpopular now. This is definitely not the case. You see a lot of them down here. Just that the most popular divs have changed quite a bit from Western Allied to these. But again, if you go back, we see a lot of the divisions here that have been released with that DLC. So it's not really that surprising. And the exact list here, I'm leaving that to you. I don't think there's anything super important here to say. Now this one, so this is my second take of this video, because the first one was way too long. This one's also going to be long, but not as long. So this is a lot of additional comments that we got here from Koenig, and they're super nice. However, I'm going to skip over some of them that are not super surprising. You can still read them if you want to, or maybe I just read them but not comment on it, because otherwise it's going to take forever. So second Panzer outperformed a map where it was played 4 times for 4 wins. Also, only one player won 4 games with it. So this, yeah, only played 12 times, won almost all of them. So one it lost, the other ones it won. And it could be Shechem maybe, where it can have a really strong opener and really destroy people. And you know, the free vet definitely matters. So there's that. Russell was picked very often and basically overperformed in CQC maps, which is where it's good at, and it was picked by experienced players. So those who know that this division, how to play this division, because it's not necessarily an easy one for a newer player, and who also know how strong it is on those maps. So this is not really surprising. Pihot is kind of the same thing on mid-range maps. Then we have this here. Despite often being banned, 9Cav was disgusting when it wasn't on loses on long-range maps, so not really surprising. But yeah, a lot of people slept on it. It got a ton of buffs in that patch. and it profited from the Valentine, it profited from the individual changes to that division, it profited from some other Soviet buffs like the AA buffs and things like that. It just added up to so many advantages that this division got, and it just needed a little bit to be really strong. And at the start, a lot of people just slept on it, which is why we see it so often. And of course, people were picking it if their opponent didn't ban it. It's like no surprise. Then we also had the no bans tournament, and this is why we see it so often with such an impressive win rate. SSB, I think it's really just because of the no bans tournament that we even see it that often, and it still is super strong. Now, this is a surprising one. I didn't know that this was so good. One of the best Soviet divisions. I know, not sure about that one because to me it doesn't look like that, but it's certainly good division in the right matchups. And I think the fact that it's been played mostly by experienced players tells us that they figured out which matchups those were and picked them. 29th got some nice buffs with Soviet armor buffs and some of the generic Soviet buffs. 20-point infantry also got buff. I think that wasn't that one. Could have been Normandy too. Not sure. But yeah, experienced players mostly played that, but yeah, it is quite good now. 5th KBX, not surprising. This was one that was often enough not banned in the Southern Theater one. We see it still every now and then because it is still good if you know how to use it, and it is a very aggressive one, which is also not surprising. 32 players won more than half the games, one of this very good division. Yeah, that is very good. I'm surprised that it still got 15 games because it is very good and usually banned on a few maps. One of these two could be Koenig. So generally, depending on the division, I might drop a name because it's channel knowledge that that person likes those division. And then, I know that you're all going to be speculating who is that going to be. So I don't feel bad for it. So again, this is an assumption. Okay, this is not a fact, but it's an assumption for all of those. There's 1 or 2 divisions where I know for a fact who is responsible for that win rate. But for the other ones, it's assumptions. And yeah, so it's potentially Koenig. Koenig is a name for all the French divisions and probably Western Allied divisions too. It's a safer name to drop because everyone knows he lost them. Everyone knows he's a master of the French divisions and Western Allies in general. So, but then again, they're very often banned for him. So there's a 50-50. It's actually more than that. Third car mechanized, yeah, it's very good. I think a lot of people, myself included, slept on it a bit, and it has performed very well. So it is now a must ban. Basically, 6th airborne, 1 experienced player, won half the games. This is very impressive. I don't know who that is. Some players played it where it has nothing to do. And yeah, so this is a classic counterpick division. And so the division that have a good win rate are either of two divisions. Either they're very strong, be that in like general, or at least after all the bans that you have, then those are the strongest ones remaining, or they're very good counter picks. So whenever your opponent picks something that is countered by those and doesn't ban that specific divisions, you can pick it and you should do very well with it. So these generally tend to have a good win rate because of that reason. However, if players played on maps where it has nothing to do, and then yeah, this win rate goes down a little bit. Working it overperformed on a specific map. I don't know which one that is. So I'm not really want to make any guesses. Could be one of the Slisk ones. Could be. I don't think it's Harrow. So I'm not sure, to be honest. It's not a CQC one, that much is clear, but which map specifically, I don't know. 20th Panzer, yeah, this is just an all-time solid division that is always good. One player definitely, okay, had the heavy lifting here, but even without that, it'd probably still be at least 50%, which is not too bad, to be honest. Castle or performs on 2 specific maps disappointing on others means that people, yeah, it's very good basically on Kostritsa and Ushanov, probably decent on Cell too, but on any other map it's not that good. So this comment here kind of tells me that people playing that one. ATF, very good on CQC maps, average on others, but still pretty strong by looks of it. Belarus, some players won several games with this good div, so this means that maybe, some players actually influence this statistics heavily. 101st, excellent on some maps against some divs, but used by a lot of players. But badly used by a lot of players, even experienced. I definitely contributed to those being badly used. And yeah, it is very popular, which might be why it is not always very well used. It's a great counterpick division at the end of the day, and this is also said here. Hardneck, very good division used by a lot. Used a lot by any type of players. Same performance with it for everyone except one player. That could be Curb. Curb is very good with Hartnett. But the rest, yeah. But it's a good sign. This means that this is one of those divisions that do well. That are good for any like players of any level of skill, which is generally good that those do exist. So it's actually quite nice to see. Then again, it's just one of those that is often not banned because it's better divisions to ban. On some maps, it's must ban though, and when it's not banned, it's one of the better ones that's available for access for sure. DFL, very good division to experienced player, won constantly with it. The others won as much as they lost. On average, they lost. Okay, or on average, division lost for most players, but 2 gave you a nice win rate. Again, Koenig is a good bet here. 26 Panzer, very good division, used a lot by any type of players. Experienced players won more with it. Yeah, I mean, it's another one of those that sometimes it's banned, but very often it slips through the bans, and then it's probably a decent one. It's also picked a lot, right? You can also look at that. So the pick rate tells us a lot about the popularity. So, you know, some of these are just go-to picks on a few maps, and this is probably one of them. Second Marcella is a very good Division 1 player, won half the games won. This is very impressive. I have no idea who that could be. Other players won as much as they lost. First on the Kufen, actually surprised that it comes out at a win rate more than 50%. Average division played by experienced players, nobody performed with. Okay, so no one is like insanely good with that one. But still got a good amount of wins for the division, because it's not a fantastic division. The first band's average division played by experienced players on a specific map. So this is not surprising. This is not one of those divisions where what we know about division doesn't really match with what we see here. We would expect this to be worse. It's kind of like 6th Airborne, where you look at it and be like, wait, how does this thing get 64% win rate? But then you have to think about, okay, this is a division that you specifically pick in the right situation. It's not a very popular pick, which we can also, where did it go? Which you can also see by only being played 13 times, which is still impressive for that division. So that means that people generally pick it when they know that it is good in that specific situation. Which might explain that win rate. Second US, on the other hand, has not been played as much. It's still very often banned. That's probably the reason why. And when it wasn't banned during the player, like no ban tournament, I guess the other ones, like, they're just better ones usually. But yeah, it is still very good. Some experienced play made it work and others didn't. At the end of the day, it has gotten quite a few nerfs over the time, and it's just not as good as it used to be. And I think that, yeah, this has fallen a lot. 84th and Panzerlehr kind of put in the same category of, he says, very good division used by any type of players. Few experienced players won with it more than they lost. And ultimately what it comes down to is, so they're very popular, picked very often, but they were also, like, generally those are banned very often. So those are divisions. I think 2 things are true for this one, or for these 2. First of all, they might be picked on maps where they just have no reason to be picked because there's better picks. People think, oh, they're good, they're not banned, so I'm going to pick it. Second thing is, they are both, in my opinion, not easy to play. So people pick them because they're good, and that they don't super well with it because they're hard to play, they may be not used to it. So this is my thought on that. Cross Deutschland, average division, played by experienced players, nobody performed with. Yeah, it's pretty average at the moment. First Fallschirmjäger, apparently 1 player performed well with, the others not so much. Blinde, good division on some maps used by any type of players, so different skill levels. 2 experienced player, 1 with it, average loss with it. Not surprising, it's a difficult one. Probably another one of these is Koenig, because it's really good with this one. 184th average division played by any type of players. Flea players performed with it. Okay, I don't know who that is, but that's actually impressive. But I guess the Valentines really helped that one, because otherwise it's just not that many reasons to play 184th, really. First, Panchelos, very good division on specific map used by experienced players, but they won as much as they lost, except for 1. No idea. But that could be another one of those that it's banned often enough on CQC heavier maps, so it could be another one of those just picked sometimes on maps where it's probably not that good. First, Fallschirmjäger, good division played by any type of player, same average performance for everyone, meh performance on most maps. Not really surprised about that one. It's definitely not as good as it used to be. CMG, this is surprising. Only 84% win rate. Very good division, experienced players won with it, but not on some maps. So this kind of tells me that it has been played often enough on maps where this is just not that good. Yeah, because this is very often banned. This is very commonly banned. and that probably dropped the win rate down quite a bit. So some of the few players that can make this work on a lot of maps are probably Gonzo and Stan. We've actually seen Gonzo doing this in a league. So on Kastritsa, which is not where I would usually pick Savici. And I think Stan too. I think Stan won against Upasa on Kastritsa too with it, if I remember correctly. So yeah, this just goes to show that in the right spot they can be quite strong. But again, on most maps, or on some maps, it's just not that good, and some players pick it and make it work, but most won't. So on 15th is just kind of jack of all trades, master of none, but very popular still. I think this is a leftover from the Man of Steel meta. It's not that good in the current meta. It's map performance on most maps, as Koenig says. But yeah, there's that. I'm surprised about this one. Bad win rate. Some players actually really like this, but most of them didn't do super well with it. And this is surprising, but it is seen as a good division. I would say so too. Especially, it's not banned very often. It got picked a decent amount of times, so this kind of surprises me. I'm not gonna lie, I don't really know how to explain that. 26th, yeah, it is a very specific, good division played by any type of players. If you have positive performance with bad performance on 2 maps, so again, people probably played it where they shouldn't. Still very popular though, interesting. So I think this was always popular and probably always will be. Walter, any type of player played it, so no matter what skill it was picked, a good amount of picks too. And yeah, nobody great with it. It was played everywhere, so this is probably part of why the win rate is not great, because this is definitely more map specific in my opinion. Third Canadian. Rank division used by everyone, even experienced players lost more than they won with it, except on 2 maps. My guess would be that one of those is Harashai. Maybe Orshais as well. And this one is a big maybe, so maybe screw that. Ignore that. But Harashai is probably a safe bet, I would say. I'm pretty sure that I did 5 out of those 15 games, maybe even more. And I definitely did my part of losing more than I win with it. So there's that. 70 Sherm average division on that, only one experienced player may work constantly. Others didn't, not surprised about that. So the win rate would probably even be worse if it wasn't for that one guy. God's Army good division, that average players played more than experienced players. And then 43rd reserve. And we also, same thing that regard that I'm going to mention, but this also has good division experience as average players struggle to perform with it. Both of these are very hard to play. And I think good is debatable here. This is why I want to specifically comment on those, because I'm not sure if they're actually that good. They can be sometimes. I think they're not generally good, but at the very least, we can say they're not easy. So in the hand, for most players, except for experienced ones, they're probably not that good. But I'm surprised that guards has been played more by average players than experienced ones. I think this is more of a counter pick specifically on a few maps. So something that I wouldn't expect average players to do as much, because they generally tend to go for generally strong divisions. And this one is not generally strong. So if we can average shift, that average players played as bad as experienced players, okay? Only if you did well on specific maps, okay? West Ponchelos, average players did bad with it. 2 experienced players won as much as they lost on 3 specific maps. Stan's probably one of them, if it wasn't banned for him. Desert Rats is very popular, and it has been so already in the Normandy DLC. It has been one of the most popular ones there, and it is just by a lot of people seen as a good one, while it actually really isn't, in my opinion. And I think the stats kind of show that to some extent. Again, we have to remember this is map and matchup specific, so people might just pick it when they have no business picking it. So this could explain this. So it could still be better, but it is definitely overrated in general, in my opinion. Average plays really bad with, yeah, there we go. As experienced players did bad also, but with at least wins on 3 maps. So the experienced players and to get some like positive win rate out of it on some maps, but okay, apparently average, not so much. But US average player did really bad. Almost no experience played with it, and if they did, they won. This is not surprising. This is incredibly difficult to play. I know Koenig who plays it well, and no other player, to be honest. I'm sure there's another 1 or 2. But so yeah, the average players would probably do bad with it, and I tried as well and did bad with it, and I think the same is probably going to be for other experienced players as well. I heard Maker is probably leftover pick from Man of Steel meta, but not as good by the looks of it as it used to be, at least not for tournament play. This was very dominant for at times, but not so much anymore. Experience plays won as much as they lost on the specific maps, average loss everywhere. Okay. Versus as average players did bad. Yeah, this is another one that has been very popular. Popularity has definitely decreased this for this meta. And I think part of it is just that it is very common with new to average players as they see it as very good, which for quick play is maybe not that wrong, but for tournament games, it's really not that good on most maps. And some maps it's good. To the point where it can be banned, then you don't play it. So yeah, there we go. For FUS, average and experienced players did bad. Few experience did well. Yeah, it is again, it is actually a difficult one to play in my opinion. Especially if you play it on a map where 2k matters. It needs a lot of micro, or even on close range ones, you still need a crap ton of micro and good planning. If there's anything heavier that you need to deal with your Hellcats. So there's that. CL is just very bad. Everyone fucked around. Yeah, it's just not in a good spot. It is way overpriced at the moment. It's just not good. It is not cost efficient at all. Most divisions are more cost efficient than this, and this just makes it very bad. It's not well adjusted to the current meta either at the moment. And I think the fact that everything got cheaper, because I looked at the normal DLC performance, it was way better. There we go, 6% win rate. And I mean, this was after Man of Steel meta, where infantry divisions already took a hit. But I think with everything getting cheaper now, this just suffered a lot from it in this way. This there. 12 average players played the average div poorly. Yeah, not surprising. And Task Force by the average did really poorly, but the experienced player didn't help either. Yeah, I don't know why it was so popular, but apparently it was, and it just is not good enough at the moment, even with the buff. Maybe it was played a lot because it got some buffs, but they weren't enough. Like that's maybe the reason why we see it played that often. It performed that poorly because people would then pick it when there was probably not the right spot to pick it. KDFS, wow, 2 wins. So yeah, I think this is just a leftover from this being good, and people still played, but it just can't hold up in the current meta. Now, here we just go through the list real quickly, and I point out some noteworthy divisions. So most of them, like everything with like, I don't know, 6 or less games is basically a coin flip. If it's very dominant, I think it's noteworthy. So there are some, this one has already been commented on though. This is really bad. One is a coin flip, we can ignore that. So it is definitely, this is one with not that many games, but 3 games is a difference. So this is just one of those again that is very specific for a map, which is why we see it do very well on those maps specifically. You pick it only on that map, usually as a counter pick. So that's where it does very well. This one could be Farid. Farid is a master of 44. So it could be him just getting all those wins. Maybe others, but I'm actually quite surprised because it's not that great of a division. So for SD, this I know specifically is one player getting both these wins, and it's just never played. So I guess no one knew how to play against this. For NOV, it's probably the same. I only know from one game for a fact, and in that one there was also skill difference, so there's that. Anything else that is noteworthy? Most of it was talked about. Again, 2 is not really special. Scottish is difficult and not in a good spot, so there's that. This one, only 6 games. However, this kind of, agrees with what we know about the division. It's not that bad. After a few bans, you can definitely pick it. It's not super popular though, so generally speaking, players who really know how to play it and really know that this is the time to play will play it. So this is why we probably get the wins. However, again, with so few data points, it is very dangerous to make any real statements about those. CL, of course, it just sucks. Yeah, this one, this is my win, I think. So it's just not good. This is not a case of 5 wins with Pronirana, and it's not a case, probably my assumption, of people don't expect it, people don't know how to handle it, and then it was picked when it just was not expected and just could do the work that it needed to do. Just my guess. As for the axis, anything interesting here? So these two kind of lump together, both with bad win rates. Not played very often, but still very clear. I show you again. It's not statistically significant, probably, the amount of times it was played, at least compared to some other divisions. Still, the difference is interesting. These are just two bland standard German tank divisions, and they're just not good enough on the maps that they are good at. Good on most maps they're not good on, so that's what we have here. This is what surprises me, to be honest. Those two are classical counterpick divisions, so those perform really badly is very interesting to me. Same for this one. So Tatra, you only ever would play as a counter as well, unless you're memeing, which might explain this. This is another. This is I forgot to mention one of the other ones as well. So this is kind of the same situation as 8th Indian that we have here. Both these are just too bland. They're very typical for they're just very mid. So whenever on most maps they're better Axis division than 25th Panzergrenadier. On most maps they're better Allied division than 8th Indian. And I think both of them were also available in one of the specific tournaments where you had specific theaters, and it's possible that they were just picked there because some of the good ones were banned. I think especially 8th Indian is in that category, this one probably as well, and then was picked and just didn't do as well because, you would have expected. Now, Teta is another one of these where the win rate is mostly caused by, first of all, the difference if it's massive, it's again not that many picks, but this is another one where people either memed with it or it was Luna who's very good with it, so this can be ignored easily. I memed with it at least 2 times and won with it in those games where we're just memeing, so that is not really telling us much. Ski Egg is another one of those where this was just one of the Axis ones that was okay at close range maps in the Southern Front, I think. Setting where allies, after the bans that you had to ban allied divisions, really had nothing good left, and then Skiegger was kind of better than what the allies had often enough, so that's where Skiegger started dominating. There's that 14th bad win, these are just bad, and this reinforces it. Surprised that Jaeger got this one, so this is interesting, but I guess it's also players who really know what they're doing, probably picking it on just the right map, and still it doesn't get above 50%. So it's definitely interesting. Yeah, some that weren't played, some bad ones that didn't do fantastic, which is not surprising. So probably, I don't know what happened there. These are coin flips, we can ignore that. But Times too long, interesting. This is definitely an interesting result as well. I know Memil played out against me once, so there's skill difference in at least one of them. Don't know where the rest of them come from though, so that's definitely interesting to see. That's a coin flip. Surprised that these two were even played. These 3 were even played. Now these were actually interesting. These I think should be mentioned because so the Finnish ones are very specific to CQC. So if someone even picks them, that means that you're on a map where those should be good at, and they still do bad. And they're not picked very commonly. So they're very often not picked, and if they're picked, they don't perform well. So this tells me that they're really in a bad spot. So the Finns could definitely use some love. And some of the Romanian ones doing interestingly well, but again, it's not that many games. So this one is especially interesting. So that's very curious there. Now, what's probably more interesting is looking at the different factions. So, first of all, types of division, tank divisions, mechanized divisions, and infantry divisions are basically the same. So we have 2 percentage points difference here between infantry and tanks. Infantry slightly favored, but really not that much. And if you look back to the last time, the difference has been decreasing, but the difference was not massive before that. So I think that means that those are balanced well at the moment. A lot of types of divisions are playable. Of course, it depends on the individual divisions. Some that used to are not anymore, like the Finns, for example, or at least some that were, or at least they're less now than they were before. And some divisions have gotten more playable. So yeah, it is still depending on, like, for individual divisions, this might not necessarily be true, but overall it seems to be somewhat balanced. Now, if you look at this is actually really interesting. So we see Soviets doing very well, Western allies not so well, and Axis a bit better, but still not getting to the 50% win rate. If you break it down, US and UK are very bad, are the Commonwealth. The French are kind of carrying the Western allies, and maybe the Polish are very good. So these includes some of the Soviet ones, or so the quick ones at least, and Pancherna, which does badly actually. So never mind. So the Commonwealth don't help here actually. But yeah, so basically French are carrying the Western allies, which is not surprising. French got some very strong, very specific divisions that are specialized in specific maps, and you would pick them there, and they do very well. And we've seen them doing very well over here as well, with DB only being at 50%, but DFL being good, and especially Dodi really carrying them. So this is not coming as a surprise to me at all. But yeah, Polish doing very well. This is pretty much Piachotti. Finns doing very bad, as we've seen. Romania's doing very well, but I think this is just these two divisions. They haven't been played that much overall, and Italian's not doing well. CL doing the heavy lifting here of the SPA performance, of course, as mentioned. What's probably more interesting is that in terms of channel wins overall, we see that Allies is slightly ahead, which is caused by the Soviets, as we can see, and Axis is slightly behind. But the difference is not incredible. Now, there's something is off here. There is 0.3 percentage points that are missing here. I guess it's probably due to rounding and such. So I don't know how it is exactly, but yeah, the difference is not massive. The gap is not massive, but Allies is definitely favored at the moment. If you look at the picks, Allies are favored overall, but Axis is not that far behind, right? The difference is still, like, Allies get 10% more picks than Axis do, roughly. It's a very roughly rounded. It's actually less than that, but you know that is something. That is definitely something. And we see this here as well, right? But overall, it's not, like, the difference is not massive at the end of the day. Now, if you look at this one, this is a bit more interesting. So we see the breakdown between armored divisions and mechanized divisions for all factions. Minor factions just containing a lot of things. We have here Bulgaria, Finland, Hungary, Romania, Yugoslavia, and Italy, but only the Axis one for Italy. And yeah, some of these, like all of these minor nations, are counted for Western allies because they're Western allied equipped, which makes sense, right? So we definitely see that Soviets are dominating, which we've seen previously, and we see that Soviet mechanized are especially overperforming. However, we got some comments here by Koenig, which are going to be very interesting, and we're going to look into them for a bit. We can actually do that right now. So for the Soviets, we definitely see that Soviets... where do we go? So mechanized divisions rocketed because of 9K, 3rd mechanized, very good performance, and the 84th and 7th mechanized that are very good as well. And they definitely profited a lot from the buffs, especially 9th calf and 3rd guard to some extent. Yeah, definitely as well, especially because of the Valentine. And this is why we see it. If we look back at here, they were already good, but it's just even better now. I think it's important to note that they're not that massively better, but still, 6 percentage points is actually, I mean, it's a lot. Doesn't look like a lot, but it is a lot, in my opinion. But yeah, so the rest here stayed relatively similar. Germans are okay in armored infantry, but mechanized is really bad. However, infantry overall is probably not that good. It's probably just those special divisions like Kessel and Dressel are really carrying it. And for the Western allies, we definitely see that armored divisions are very bad, actually. Mechanized are just a little bit better, but not a lot. And the infantry divisions are still pretty good. And I think this is generally also the trend that we tend to see, that it tends to be a good division overall. It's just not played, or they have very good divisions overall still. And those are the easy ones to play as well. Minor nations are not very representative because they are sample size too small. I think armored divisions are the best at the moment, and it's interesting to see them performing. But we had, Blindata doing very well. We had Bronirana doing very well. Oh, this one, sorry. And so that might be part of the reason why the armored divisions are looking very good at the moment, even though they might not, it's a few that weren't played very often that are doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. So we should be careful with that for sure. What's definitely interesting here as well is the German infantry divisions improved. Mechanized divisions, not really armored divisions, stayed pretty much the same. And the Western Allied definitely saw a drop. Like armored and mechanized divisions saw a massive drop in win rate. Infantry divisions also, but they're still good in comparison to these. So I think that's very interesting. Now, if you go to the interpretation of this, actually, we have some nice points here. So Western Allied infantry divisions win rate is still very good because of SSD and Dodi being on the top. 6 Airborne ATF on the first Brio DFL still have good performance. So they still get carried by these. SSB is still a powerhouse and it was picked quite a bit. So if this wasn't here, we're probably more closer to 50% here. But some of these are still very powerful and some of these are still very often banned. So we have to note here that these are still very good. We covered Soviet mechanized divisions. Western armored divisions decreased because more AT tools and cheaper tanks for their opponent. This is definitely an important factor, quite right. Some AT tools have been getting cheaper with the Hell's Highway balancing patch. And some of the tanks, like Panzer IV specifically, and the Valentines got cheaper too. And that helped those divisions so well to deal with Western Allied, because Western Allied have in general expensive unit, especially the tank divisions. They rely a lot on Shermans as their main tanks, which are expensive. So if you have cheap tools that can deal with those, that's an easy way to deal with them. 50 cal half tracks are also not cheap. So if you have cheap and light AT that can deal with those efficiently, again, it definitely hurts those armored divisions. Average players also lost a lot with it on bad maps for them, not surprising, but also, again, it needs to be said they're hard to play. So that plays into that. Nerfs of 4FS, didn't know it was nerfed, to be honest, but okay. Now the Western Allied mechanized divs decreased because Task Force Butler's catastrophic win rate. Yeah, that definitely has, it was played quite a bit, so I'm not surprised that this pulled it down quite a bit. So Guinness and Furkane win rate less good as before, so definitely those apparently are not as well adjusted to the current meta, so that's why we see this decreasing now. Now the German armor divisions increased, but very slightly, only by 1 percentage point, because the stuff is cheaper and because apparently experienced players played it more. So overall, yeah, not a big change. So maybe the Panzer IV buff was not as big a deal yet. Or at least it was not as much for the Axis as it was for the Allies, probably. German infantry divisions increased because more AT tools, yeah, and cheaper too in some cases. Other buffs on infantry and AA. Yeah, I don't recall all the infantry buffs. Some of them, like Russell, got some fast transports, which is huge. And of course, the bad of the two flag, like 37mm flags, was it's also buffed in availability, so you can give it more veterancy, which definitely makes it do better. Experienced players have won more with some of the specific divisions on CQC maps, and the Russell performance specifically carried this. And this comes to no surprise. We've looked at this, so it is some very specific inter-divisions really carrying these, because a lot of the other ones are not that great. And then the Soviet armor divisions increased because the cheaper T-34, yeah, 7642, and better avail on the first air military, which is massive for the Soviets because now they can actually protect their assets from air spam, or at least better than before, and that really makes a huge difference. Yeah, they also got some nice additions like the Recon Sherman. There's also a Recon T-45 on another division. There's all these little things that definitely help. Oh, one thing that definitely made a change for Western Allied as well, including 3rd Canadian, is the price increase on the Wolverine, by the way. French were also affected by this. This could also have been playing a role. And yeah, 10th and 29th has just performed very well, but that again has to do with the meta change and just how the balance works these days. And we have to remember that these things are not happening in a vacuum, right? So all these things leads not just to divisions being better or worse, but also to different divisions being picked. If some divisions are all of a sudden picked more often, that are well countered by a division that was otherwise not picked very often, this division now, even if it might not have gotten any buffs whatsoever, which is not true for 29th at least, this one got some buffs. But if, some divisions that might not have gotten any buffs might just be more popular now because they counter some divisions that just got popular this patch. So that's another thing that we need to keep in mind here. And not specifically pointing out for any division here, but just, something that we could also think about. And some divisions increased but also I think not by a lot, because of the performance of third VDV, 184th, thanks to the buffs of the Valentine. Yeah, I mean, 184 probably was not that good before. We could check real quick if you can see it. And for some, yeah, not even played. And now, 12 picks. 50% win rate, which is pretty good, but it's not that dominant though. And yeah, we have these which are very good, but it's also said that there are a few players that did very good with it. So specific players that are just influencing this heavily. Now, we're getting to the end of it. Income, not really surprising. We have, let's finish the types of divisions. So first of all, we see here Soviet mechanized best. Minor nations are high up, but again, this should be taken with a grain of salt because the sample size is small. Then we have Soviet Infantry Division, Western Allied Infantry Division, and Soviet Armored Division. So in this table here, Axis overall still very low, and Western Allies definitely second place, maybe, depending on how you take the order, really. Well, yeah, depending on how you look at this, it's better, but maybe not. Hard to tell. Now, on average, though, if you look at this is not too bad. This especially is also not too bad. So I would not say that they're unbalanced at the moment. I think they're in a decent spot balancing wise between the faction. Not talking about individual divisions. That's a whole different story. But a faction as a whole, decently balanced. Also, of course, after the bans, because they always happen. So if you ignore a bans that we make for League, that might be a different story. So it would also be interesting, but this, of course, Koenig can't really collect unless everyone sends him his bans. And we should only get the full picture of that if we get all the bans that people generally do, and then we see which divisions are banned very often. And again, this also doesn't mean necessarily that they're super strong, it just means that they're perceived as strong. But yeah. It definitely shows that Soviets are dominating at the moment. We see this here, we see this here, but at least Western Allies and Axis are balanced at the moment, I guess. Now, this is interesting because first of all, we see which maps are most popular, and this is not surprising. These are the mid range maps and some mid GCKC range ones that are not annoying because they have a river. Looking at U2. Or just horribly unbalanced, looking at you. And these are generally popular. Long-range maps, pure long-range maps are not so popular. But among those, the two, Slutsky and Slutskis are most popular. The unbalanced one, not so much. But what's interesting to me is that if you look at just the mid-range maps, on some of them, well, this doesn't really count. Sample size too small. On the pure mid-range map, allies tend to do better, which is not surprising at all, because this is where allies are really powerful, right? Especially in towns like, so Bober has quite a bit of town. Hershey is the town on the one flank, the town in the center are very crucial. So these are very important. Even if you go to Lenina, which is also CQC, it is another one where, yeah, it's just not that big of a sample size, but very clear here. Just allies focused because they do well in the towns, generally speaking. Now, if you go to long range maps, it's a interesting mix of allies and Axis winning, and I can't really explain that super well. The allies are probably more due to the Soviets with the T-34, with the IS-2, which is actually one of the better super heavy tanks, the best one actually, because it's a nice spot with performance and price. So that could be the reason for that. Not 100% sure. And on Slutsky, you can do you're not as focused on the 2K maybe, so that could be a reason why the Axe is better there. But what's interesting is the long to mid-range maps, which show an interesting picture here. Brest West is more Axe's favored, which is not surprising, right? I mean, long to mid, you would expect Axis to be good because they have, a lot of the 750 meter range tools. The Panzer IVs are actually cheap for that range as well, and they still have the Panthers and whatnot. But on Sedilce and Ciano, you have allies winning. Now, Ciano is really just depending on who got the good side, so we kind of ignore that. But Sedilce is very interesting in that regard. So I'm surprised that the allies is actually very good over there. Tali, same kind of picture, but Tannenberg is reversed around, even though you have the town there. But maybe you just can't make enough use of it. So those are very interesting, and I can't really explain that difference. So let me know in the comments if you have ideas. And then a pure CQC1 cell is the Axis dominating, which is not surprising, because the Axis has some of the specialized divisions that are performing very well at the moment, like Russell. Now, it should be banned. However, I've noticed that a lot of people still leave some of these super good Axis divisions open because they don't know just how strong they are. So I think that statistics just tells us which divisions are not banned often enough and which division is performing very well at the moment. And maybe less so how strong Axis and Allies really are on that map, because in my opinion, there's a lot of strong Allied divisions there as well. But there's that. More interesting is the mid to CQC ones. So Axis, higher win rate on Usha North, which has town and forest. Lina, we've kind of covered, is more of a town map, so I'm not surprised about the allies winning. But Kostritsa, also more on the Axis side. And Tsubushin as well. So I would have expected to mid and CQC that this is where allies would be much better. So this can either be because they are banned more often, or that might just be because of the fact that, yeah, Axis are really better, but I don't know which divisions that would be except for the specific CQC powerhouses. So if you guys have any ideas, because like Russell can do well in Oceano, for example. It does very well in Kostritsa. Well, we also hear though is that the difference here, for example, is not massive, but here it is. And there's a good amount of games being played. So I'm very curious to hear, guys, if you have any. I don't have any why this is. Because again, some divisions like Russell and Castle do very well there, but there are some Western allies who do as well. Like Dodie has also super high win rate. 9Cav has a higher win rate. SSB, like those are good divisions for those maps. So the fact that they're still Axis favorite is interesting to me. So if you have any idea, let me know in the comments, because I don't know. And then last but not least, the incomes. It's still Maverick is most popular, followed by Balance though, and not Vanguard. Vanguard is still the odd one of the three most popular ones. And then the really odd ones are those. You don't really see Vanguard. V for Victory, a lot. Flatline even less, and Juggernaut a bit more, but not a whole lot. Both these are relatively bad. So, I mean, this you only ever want to use to counterbalance, and even then it's very often not the best pick. And Flatline is just horrible in general. So that could also been someone memeing or a newer player who doesn't know. So that would be my guess. V for Victory is probably mostly influenced by Memil, who actually really likes it and is actually the master of this. So there's that, and I think that also kind of skews the data, because if you look at the income matchups, you see that V for Victory gets some good wins. And I have a feeling that this is just because it's Memil, and Memil also beat some good players, or some not so good players, or not so good, so average to good players, but not top players with V for Victory often enough. But he also works against good players, just to be fair. I think that could be part of this. But as we can see, Vanguard and Maverick still win most of the time against Balance. Not really surprising. Aggressive incomes generally pay off very well, especially if the time limit. That just helps. Balance versus V for Victory is better for V for Victory. Yeah, it's kind of a Balance versus Vanguard, but then you also go long. Of course, there's B phase, which is important, but yeah. And then Maverick versus V for Victory. Now, this is interesting, but as we had this debate whether it is a counter or not, ultimately, I think I have to agree with what Emil said. V for Victory can counter Maverick very well if you know well how to play V for Victory against Maverick. If you don't, it is usually a bad idea. So this is probably how this came to happen. I would not be surprised if most of these are from Emil. Now Maverick versus Vanguard is interesting because Vanguard is clearly winning, and this matchup is happening very often apparently, more than Vanguard versus Balanced, and we've definitely seen that a lot in the cast as well. And this is actually very surprising, but it definitely shows that you should not underestimate Vanguard. Both these stats actually show that it's not as popular, but it definitely has a lot of power, and maybe it's worth giving it a try every now and then. And yeah, V for Victory versus Vanguard is not being played that often. V for Victory is often seen as a counter against Vanguard, but the data here shows that Vanguard, well, this is not very representative, so take this with a grain of salt, but it is not as bad for Vanguard apparently as we would have thought it was, so that's definitely interesting too. And I still ended up with almost an hour, so I tried to bring it down, but I just failed. But anyway, so what can we take away from all of this? First of all, it is, of course, if we go to the popularity again, that this patch, or at least since the last patch in this meta, Soviet and like the most popular divisions are Soviet and Axis ones. Again, in total popularity, Western allies are not really that far behind, but the most popular divisions are from those two factions. In terms of overperforming divisions, it's again not really expected at all. It's those very map-specific divisions that are very good on that map and are picked by experienced players only who also know how to use them properly, and the divisions that are generally strong, like 9cav and SSB, of course, as well as divisions that are good counter picks. So this is really not surprising at all. Once again, what we see here in terms of performance is limited. I think the no bans tournament has helped us a little bit here with the win rate of some divisions that we otherwise wouldn't really see winning as often because people play them when they shouldn't be played. But we still need to keep in mind that some of these divisions that we haven't seen here performing super well are not necessarily bad. They're just very often banned, and whenever they're not, they're played. Also, again, sometimes players play divisions that are difficult but known to be good, and then they can't play them well because they're difficult. Other than that, we have definitely seen that Soviets are performing better at the moment, and Western allies and Germans are lagging behind a bit. However, the difference is not massive. It's mostly Soviet mechanized divisions. And again, before you get to the point where you're screaming, oh, Soviets overpowered, and personally, I'm not much of a Soviet player, so I would prefer if the others were better. But we have to keep in mind here that those were the most recent buffs. You know, with the last patch. Well, right now, not the last one, but no, the one for that meta. So a lot of people probably haven't it took a while, we've seen this with 9cav, it just took a while for some people to get the message. And the divisions that are really popular and have a high win rate are the same few very strong Soviet divisions that I guess just weren't banned often enough at the end of the day. I think this is what it really comes down to. So a lot of people just took their time to realize how strong they are. And we've seen that in plenty of casts, 3rd mechanized, 7th mechanized, 9cav, they have been doing very well. And they should just be banned usually. I think if that is going to be the case, the Soviet mechanized division's performance is going to drop quite considerably. Now the others are still doing well as well, so it's not like they're doing bad, but they are not as powerful as those, and I think that's gonna drag down the stats of the Soviets quite a bit as well. And then, you know, I would say 2 percentage points is not nothing, but in that range, it's overall pretty okay. And again, I think once these Soviet divisions are banned more often, that's definitely going to be the case. But it at least clearly shows, I think, that the Soviets also don't need any further buffs. Like, at least as far as the tournament setting is concerned, I think Soviets are in a very good spot at the moment. And so there's nothing that needs to be tweaked on them at this point. Now, it doesn't mean that any of these factions are unbalanced at the moment in general. It's hard to tell because, again, these are tournament stats, so these depend a lot on picks and bans. We have seen very specific divisions that changed the stats for one faction quite considerably, or not changed, but influenced them quite considerably. We have some very important notes here by Koenig where that might relativize some of these things. So at the end of the day, I think what we see here is that, as always, certain divisions really are carrying in a tournament setting certain factions. However, the overall picture doesn't look that bad. Soviets have some divisions that carry them. German have some divisions. Western Allied have some divisions that carry them in these stats. So if you take out all of those, most likely not a lot is going to change. So at least for the tournament setting, I think the balance looks all right at the moment. Now, Axis being a little bit behind Soviet might change now with the current buffs that we got in the latest patch. I'm definitely curious to see that. I think the big loser of all those patches is Western Allies, but at the moment, it doesn't really look like... I mean, 46% is not that good, but at the moment, I'm not really afraid of them falling further behind. So... But that is just my feeling. Okay, the data doesn't tell us that. We need to wait for the next set of data until we really can tell that. This is very important to say here. Other than that, not a lot has changed in terms of the maps. I feel like I've not compared those, but what we see is what we expect in most cases. Same for the incomes. I think that the latest balancing changes haven't really impacted them too much. It is the same picture as far at least as I can remember. We always see the aggressive incomes being generally better. So yeah, I hope that next or during this patch until the next one, if there's even going to be a next one, we get some more information on the minor nations as well, so that we can get a better picture of how they are performing, because these are, I think, are the biggest wildcard here at the moment. I personally feel like they're also not doing very great in general, but that is more of a quick play feeling and less of a tournament feeling. And again, the stats show that they did well. It's just that we don't have a lot of data on them, so we can't really be sure if they really do well or not. But yeah, so that's that. Hope you enjoyed this little different kind of video. And yeah, if you like it, check out what Attack Per has to say about it as well, because I think it's also interesting. He might interpret some things differently. He might have his own thoughts on things, and personally, I'm at least very much awaiting his video. So originally, I hoped we could time them so that we could release them together, but this was not the case, since he has apparently plenty of things in the backlog. But whenever he releases, go check it out for sure. I'm also very curious already. And again, huge shout out to Koenig. But yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for checking in. Thanks for listening to my rants about all these things. My thoughts on the matters. Now, of course, your thoughts are just as important as mine, and your interpretations are just as important as mine. So please go into the comments and let me know what you think. What ideas do you have for certain things that we see that are surprising? What do you actually find not surprising that I found surprising? Where do you disagree? All these kind of things, let me know. I'm very happy to read all those comments. I really do my best to answer them too. So yeah, thanks to all of you for being here. Have a great day and see you all next time. And of course, huge shout out again to Koenig. So thanks for watching. Bye everyone.